I have a narcissistic boss. What do I do?
If your manager is dealing with a serious case of narcissism, you need my 5 strategies on how to work with a narcissistic boss. Hello and welcome back to my channel where I help you slay your career and cultivate the successful life you deserve. For the best career advancement advice, make sure you click that subscribe button plus the notification bell. I upload a new video each Tuesday. Today's video is a viewer request in how to deal with a narcissistic boss. Look, there's a big difference between a bad boss and a boss who is a narcissist. And I know a lot of people are self-absorbed, but let's just face it, sometimes we have a manager who is diagnosable. To survive working with a narcissistic boss, there's a few things that you need to do, and that is exactly what I am covering in this video. If you're ready, click that like button and let's jump right into it. We have to start off with first things first. We need to realize that everything is always about them. That is the definition of a narcissist, is someone who is not just self-obsessed, but someone who is unable to empathize or to really relate to other people. The universe is truly centered upon the narcissist, at least in their opinion. While this is the most frustrating trait of a narcissist for most, it also can be one of the easiest ones that you can actually exploit about them. You just need to make everything about them. When you have a request or you need something from your narcissist boss, frame it as in what is in it for them. When they know that they are acting in their own best interest, they are going to happily oblige. Whether it works out for you or not is kind of neither here nor there to them. It's really all about them, their benefit, and their appearance. Now, drawing from that, because a narcissist is self-centered, they're also someone who is unlikely to give acknowledgement unless you have made your success their success as well. Now, they are apt towards stealing credit, so that is something that you do need to be aware of as well, but this is a very productive way in terms of getting the things that you actually need to survive and thrive when you are working with a narcissistic manager. Your narcissistic boss is likely to take credit for the good things and the good impact that you actually make. And on that note, you need to make sure that you are asserting credit and getting the acclaim that you deserve. And if this is one of the struggles that you are experiencing when you are working with your narcissistic boss, I encourage you to check out the link down in the description to a free resource that is going to help you enhance your visibility to get credit for your work and elevate your status at the same time. Because they are self-obsessed and they are people who tend to not be able to take any accountability when things don't go well or any criticism, which leads me to my second strategy in working with a narcissistic manager, and that is to think critically. Because the narcissist is out to serve themselves, and let's just face it, they aren't exactly married to the truth. And I know you can't possibly think of someone like this. Because the narcissistic version of the truth is modified to the one that is the best and most flattering for them, it's really important to think critically. What does this mean? It means when the narcissist gives you, say, some constructive or not so constructive feedback, you actually need to evaluate that to see if it is properly identifying the problem and the scope of the impact of that issue or behavior or skill or whatever it is on the actual problem. Because remember, the narcissist is going to find a way for this to not have anything to do with them, even when it has everything to do with them. They're going to be ones to pass the blame and the shame on to you. So you need to be aware of that. On the flip side, when they're giving positive information and acclaim, we also need to think critically about this and if it actually happened. Again, the narcissist is inclined to stroke their own ego. And if your narcissistic boss is talking about, their fantastic stature or how valued the team is or some award or something like that, whatever it is. So if your narcissistic manager is talking about acclaim that he or she is receiving, you need to actually evaluate if that is actually the circumstances and events that actually occurred. And I know that most of us are much more willing to do that for the things that are critical about us versus the positive things that we are told by the narcissist. However, we can't do one without the other. And what we really need to do is to evaluate what our narcissistic manager is telling us to make sure that we are filtering for the truth through the deception. And that actually leads me directly to the third thing to deal with a narcissistic manager, and that is to depersonalize. What I mean by depersonalization is that you are disconnecting their behavior, their attitudes, and their feedback to identify it as a portion of their narcissism as opposed to something that is, let's just call it what it is, based in reality. The more that you acknowledge the highs and lows that the narcissist is likely to bring into your life on a day-to-day basis at work, the more you're going to be able to stay steady when you are dealing with them. I know that this can be very challenging, especially when you're faced with a narcissist boss who is reprimanding you, publicly shaming you, or acting in any other reprehensible way. But as much as possible, when you know you're dealing with a narcissist, you must detach the feedback that they're giving you and not take it personally. Really what it comes down to is the way that your narcissistic boss is treating you is not a reflection on you. It is 100% a reflection on them and their narcissism. But even more important than evaluating the information that they're giving you for feedback, for action, or for just that good feeling is that narcissists actually have a tendency towards something called gaslighting. If you haven't heard the term gaslighting before, it's essentially them forcefully telling you their version of the truth until you actually believe it. This can be very abusive behavior that can have very negative ramifications on you. And trust me, the narcissist can be very powerful in their deception. Thinking critically about the things that they are telling you, especially when they're telling you things that are based in criticism of you, need to be things that are really things that you need to evaluate to determine the validity on their own. I'm not saying to just reject all criticism from your narcissistic boss. Believe it or not, they might actually give you some good, valuable, and actionable feedback from time to time. What you need to do though is differentiate the actual feedback from what I'm just going to call their bluster, which is really them transmitting their accountability and trying to put it onto you. And that brings me to the fourth strategy in dealing with a narcissistic manager, and that is knowing their limitations. Especially if your boss really does have narcissistic personality disorder, that is a mental illness and we need to take that seriously. It does have a harsh stigma attached to it, and that might be something that is actually preventing them from getting help. While your narcissist boss lacks empathy, it doesn't mean that you need to lack empathy towards them. Instead of getting down to their level, let's see if we can raise the bar and bring them up to ours. There can be strategies that we undertake and things that we consider on a day-to-day basis to acknowledge and work around the limitations of our narcissistic boss. Things like knowing that they are not someone who is going to take any level of accountability when things go wrong is something that's going to allow us to basically avoid an argument and the situation escalating when we try to actually hold them accountable, because from a psychological perspective, they cannot do that. We can also do things like help them save face in those instances where they are publicly being cast in a bad light, which is really going to enrage the narcissist. And I'm not saying this to stroke their ego and to really bow down to the narcissistic boss. It really is to make your life easier, because when the narcissist is triggered, they are going to lash out, and that is going to make your life much more annoying. Also, in this note, when you're working with a narcissistic boss is something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and that is acknowledging the fact that you are likely not going to have a personal connection with your narcissistic manager. Personal connections are ones that they struggle with, and it is unfortunately part of the mental disorder which they are dealing with. And I know a lot of ambitious professionals who've really bashed their heads against the wall trying to build a relationship with a narcissist which just wasn't available. If you think that your boss is a narcissist and you have tried to build that positive relationship with them and it just hasn't worked, acknowledge it for what it is and just focus on having a productive relationship with your narcissistic boss, and stop trying to reform it into something that is going to be sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, because that is just not going to happen. The final and the most important thing to do when you're working with a narcissistic manager is to have your exit strategy. While there are things that you can do to cope and really tolerate your narcissistic boss, they quite honestly are just someone that that you don't really need to work with. There's a lot of opportunities out there. If you're working at a mid-sized company or a large company, explore to see if there's another team that you can transfer to or another manager you can work with. However, if this person is unescapable because there aren't other teams or it's a small company or something like that, what you need is to have your exit strategy. Even though you might be able to establish a productive working relationship with your narcissistic boss, they are going to create a negative atmosphere and likely a toxic work environment for you, whether or not they like you. It is just something that the narcissistic boss will do. And don't let them fool you and gaslight you when things are good for just a little bit, because while they might be able to put on the facade and quell your stresses for just a few minutes in order for you to stay and get them what they want, which probably is just simply that they don't want to have the turnaround because it makes them look bad, you need to be working the entire time on getting out. At the end of the day, this life is way too short to deal with a narcissistic boss and to be in any job or to be in any position where you are not being staged to flourish. If you have a narcissistic boss and you know you need an exit strategy and you just don't know how to activate your job search and you really prefer to avoid putting in hundreds of applications, check out this video, which has my best job search strategies for 2020. I'll see you over there. Bye for now. Is it recording? Yeah, okay. I really need to wear my glasses when I do this. My knee. Something's always popping when I'm recording.